Now into the world of energy. Africa's leading energy sector advocacy group, the African Energy Chamber, is set to take on international banks and other institutions that are pushing against investment in Africa's oil and gas industry. The African Energy Chamber says it's marks of hypocrisy for the advanced economies and institutions to promote the boycott of hydrocarbon investments on the continent while they pursue similar projects in their backyards. Let's bring on for this conversation Ayuk, the Executive Chairman of the African Energy Chamber based in South Africa. Thank you, NJ, for making the show tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. The new year 2024 is halfway through right now. What are you seeing on the ground at the AEC in terms of foreign investment inflows into the continent's oil and gas sector?
Borson, a lot of investment has come into Africa during first quarter 2024. A lot of it has come through legacy investment made by IOCs in oil and gas project, be it 6 wells that we're going to see being drilled in Mozambique by ENI, or Chevron and Woodside drilling in Namibia by end of this year. But historic this first oil in Senegal by Woodside Energy with Sagoma, almost a $5 to $6 billion investment. But you've also seen a lot of mergers and acquisitions, as you saw with Chapal in Nigeria with Total Energies, and Total Energies also extending rig time in Congo Brazzaville. But we've not really seen a lot of funding coming in from DFIs or from international banks into African energy projects, especially upstream, and also field development projects or gas development projects that a lot of people in Europe and other parts of the world are calling it. We have a lot of stranded gas in Africa that needs to be monetized and being developed. We're not really seeing the money coming in, and we need to do something about it.
What is the big pushback, really, the agenda for the snubbing or boycotting Africa's oil and gas sector investment? Talk to me on that.
It's been a big issue around climate change. The idea that if you invest more in Africa upstream, Africa oil and gas, you're going to see stranded assets. They're not thinking about stranded lives. Don't you forget, we have so many young people without jobs in Africa. You can find half of the continent that is not industrialized enough, a continent with so many young people thinking about immigrating to Europe or Dubai or other parts of the world. So because of climate concerns, Africa is being choked out of any financing for its oil and gas industry. Ask young Nigerian or Angolan who are involved in developing marginal fields. It is damn too hard to raise capital for any project, whether you want to develop gas, whether you want to develop marginal fields to produce 5,000 to 10,000 barrels, let alone go in there. But at the same time, we've seen calls from the IEA that has been very, very wrong on most of the energy issues. Doesn't factor Africa. Fatih Birol has been an absolute disgrace for that organization, calling that they should stop all investment in all new African exploration projects. That is that is catastrophe for Africa. That is going to really lead us into a big epidemic when it comes to developing our continent. And it's something that we should not accept right now, because these forces have really not done fair to Africa. So they have rallied because of climate change. Western banks, BlackRock, Royal Bank of Scotland, Royal Bank of Canada, HSBC, Societe Generale, and say you should not be investing in Africa oil and gas industry. At the same time, these banks profit a lot of money from African pension funds. When African countries do euro bonds or dollar bonds, they're the ones running those projects. When African countries have to invest money abroad in sales, they're the one doing that. Most transactions around Africa are carried by them, but they are not willing to invest in our own natural gas industry. But they're investing in European natural gas industry, where Europe says today natural gas is green, so they can invest in it. But natural gas is green for Europe, but it's not green for Africa, where we have 600 million people without access to electricity. Norway is they're investing $18 billion in Norway. Norway's 4 million people. Norway is doing 4 million barrels, the second largest producer in Europe. They invest in billions of dollars. They signed $50 billion of gas deal between Germany and Norway, and they invest in it. But when it comes to Africa, they're telling the banks, if you invest in African oil and gas, we are going to cut you off. And we think it's time to take them on and really take time to call them out on this. And I think the Energy Chamber's decision in litigating on this kind of financial apartheid is the right thing to do.
Well, we're going to come to that in the conversation. Just a few minutes, NJ. The trend you're talking about since 2024 started in terms of oil and gas licensing rounds, including the oil majors, as it were, investments around the world, especially in Europe and North American region. This discrimination against Africa, oil and gas investment on the continent, how really deep is it as we speak right now? We have so much to deal with on the continent, but again, we've had to deal with climate change effects and consequences as well. How do we balance this?
Climate change and energy poverty are two sides of the same coin. We got to deal with them both. The issue here is that the North Sea in the UK, they're giving out more than 200 licenses. They're opening coal plants, new coal plants in Poland, in Germany, and in the Netherlands. Norway is giving out more licenses and there's going to be more drilling. I call Norway the drill nation of Europe. The United States is opening out more licenses and there's going to be drilling more. At the same time, they're telling Africans not to drill. Don't forget, if there is a climate problem, they need to decarbonize and Africans need to industrialize because our greenhouse gas emissions are less at 2.73%. If we produce all of Africa's natural gas, we license Africa, go out and drill and produce this gas to develop Africa, our greenhouse gas emissions are going to grow up by just 0.68%. So there is no need that you have to choke Africa out of financing and you got to cut off projects and fighting to cut off funds using their NGOs in Mozambique or South Africa or the East African crude oil pipeline. That is just dead wrong. At the same time, they're lighting up coal-fired plants, but Africans cannot use the cleanest form of fossil fuels, natural gas, to really industrialize and power Africa. How do they think we're going to power their mines for critical minerals when we don't even have electricity? Look at the DRC with less than 17% that have electricity in that country. We think it's time for African leaders to wake up. It's time for the private sector to step up, but we need to fight back against this injustice, which we call financial apartheid, while at the same time when Western countries continue to really drill, really produce natural gas, and actually offtake most of the small scoop of gas we have in Africa. They're taking it right back to Europe while we stay poor. That is unjust, it's unfair, it's outrageous, it's outlandish, and it needs to be fixed.
Very interesting scenario. Just about a year or so ago, Russia and a number of African countries were being visited, including Nigeria, to supply gas to Europe because of the war between Russia and Ukraine. And suddenly, Africa is being told not to produce gas. So I'm beginning to find out here what has changed from around the COP28 summit in Dubai, and what else has happened since then. Ayuk, are there friends of Africa out there as we speak right now, as far as investments are concerned and projects? Do we still have anyone out there standing in for the continent?
We have a lot of friends in Africa. We've seen a lot of love out of London, out of New York, out of Houston. They're still investing, they're still coming strong, in spite of the insurmountable odds being put against anybody that wants to invest in Africa upstream. A lot of mid-sized companies, wildcats coming out of the United States or Europe or even Asia, wanting to look at new onshore fields. It is tough. It's a tough time, but these guys are really pushing forward and they're going ahead. But we also have to look at this and understand that it's not going to be waiting for some white knight to come from outside to help us. We have to really realize that Superman is not coming. Batman is not coming. Wakanda Forever is a good movie, but the Black Panther is not coming. We would have to do this ourselves. We would have to rally African capital. We're going to have to create African funds, private equity, to really focus on this, because we cannot look at Europe and the hypocrisy coming around, especially around the IEA and some of the European nations, and think that they're going to do it for us. Don't do what they tell you to do. Do what they do. Watch what they do. What they do is they produce gas to solve their problems. They produce oil to solve their problems. That's why it is very important we embark on those 3 words of freedom. Drill, baby, drill. We need to do that in Africa, and we need to do it more, and we don't need to apologize to anybody for wanting to produce oil and gas to solve our problems and help our people. That is our sovereign right. That's our God-given right, and we shouldn't apologize for it. But the African politicians need to come on board. They need to cut taxes. They need to provide the right kind of incentives. They need to approve deals. They need to make it faster for people to come in. It shouldn't take too long to build a project and a time to approve a project and build it, and the time you need to approve that project, because a lot of bureaucrats are sitting on a lot of projects and not moving. So we also have a role to play in Africa. But drill, baby, drill is the way to go, and you're going to be hearing that a lot from us in the chamber. We don't apologize for that.
Yeah, we've talked about upstream. Let's come downstream. For example, the Dangote Refinery in Nigeria is crowded out loud against what he describes as concerted actions by vested international oil industry interests to cripple his $20 billion new refining investment. What are you learning on the ground, Anjay?
I think it's quite unfortunate the Dangote Refinery has been facing a lot of these problems. But the truth of the matter is that they all need to get on the table and sort this one out. This is a $20 billion investment in an African country, one of the largest you've seen around the world. And we can't let this go down because you got a construct of companies want to play politics around it to defray that. Because when we let that happen, what that speaks is it stifles any other African businessman that want to take on these humongous projects. The truth of the matter is that most of the oil trading firms, they have made so much money in Africa for the last 50 to 60 years. They've never done something like this. Nobody has ever done what Dangote has done. I don't think anyone would ever do it. And we cannot dissuade this. We think it's time to really honor our commitments to this refinery with the right kind of incentives, the right kind of trading practices to ensure that this refinery lives there. If we let this go down, we're sending a wrong message to Africans that take on a big job to invest in Africa. But we got to get the regulator together. We got to get the companies together with the Dangote refineries. And sometimes, we got to sit around the table and fix it, because we think the polarization and the backlash that has come out of this is not good for our industry. We need to call time out, and we need to step up our game in fixing problems. I think I love the oil industry. We know how to get deals done. We fix everything. So this is going to be fixed. I think right now it's just time for some poetry, but the process is going to take place very, very soon.
Yeah, interestingly, if we put all this together, contextualize for me, NJ, why the incoming African Energy Bank operation should be fast-tracked in the interest of the continent's oil and gas industry.
We need to put our money where our mouth is. For the most part, we're talking about we want money in Africa Energy. We want to develop an African Energy Bank. But the states need to put money there. We fly private jets. We spend money on buying fancy equipment and all of that. This is something that is really going to really drive up Africa. And it's not just about the states. It's also about the private sector. They need to step in. They need to really shore up the bank and its operations to ensure that we can make this bank functional and make it very, very interesting. By doing so, it opens the door for many African hedge funds, private equity, small other funds to come in and really drive up energy development. Afro-Exim has done an amazing job together with the African petroleum producers, but that's just the beginning. We need to go on a super drive. We need to drive that very fast. We hope Nigeria provides all the right kind of facilities for hosting the bank. But this African Energy Bank is here. We got to make it happen. It is our chance to really demonstrate that we can provide African solutions to really show up our gas development in Africa. But at the same time, also looking at a just energy transition that is so much needed for our continent. And we must not lose this. And I tell you this, Borsin, we're going to be having African Energy Bank at the Africa Energy Week in Cape Town. It's going to be huge. It will be something like what you've never seen. I call it SKD, something kind of different. We are going to really make sure that we get the right kind of commitments. We're going to support them in fundraising to really ensure that this bank takes off. And I think that as an African, we owe it to this bank. We owe it to those 600 million silent majority that don't have electricity. That is our job that we have to do.
Just to summarize very quickly, NJ, for just 1 minute, how soon is the chamber, the AEC, looking to litigate these institutions pushing back against Africa's hydrocarbon sector investment?
We've sent them letters. We've sent them demand letters. We hope fourth quarter this year we are going to. It is going to be blitzkrieg. We are very, very bullish about the case. We've been working on this for a year and a half. And we think that going into COP, they would be surprised. It would not be a COP. It will be a COP of lawsuits. And that's what we will do. We think that anybody who is naive enough to think they would change without us going to courts, then they are living in La La Land or in their own Neverland Ranch. We have no intention on backing down. We would not give in. The discriminatory practices need to stop. You can't finance Europe, use African money in financing Europe, but at the same time, you wouldn't finance Africa. That is wrong. And I bet anybody out there to prove to me why we need to have second-class energy or we need to be the continent that doesn't have the right kind of development. I would go head to head with them and toe to toe, week to week, great to great. But I think that we have the right. I'm a lawyer. I've never been excited about any case than this one. I think you're going to see a blockbuster, and we're going to hold them accountable. This is going to happen, and we know we're going to get some breakback. But you know what? I can take the heat. If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. I'm ready to take the heat, and I think if we do it, it will be worth it.
Well, thank you so much for those insights and your passion for Africa's energy sector. NJ Ayuk, the Executive Secretary at the African Energy Chamber. Do have a great evening over there in Johannesburg.